Right now, Minnesota is going green. How much marijuana can you have on you now that the state's new law legalizing cannabis has gone into effect? Then, what cities are pressing pause on smoking in public? Why not everyone is ready to get on board? And what the new law means for tens of thousands of Minnesotans with prior drug convictions, how it's giving them a fresh start. That's all coming up on Going Green. Welcome to this special program from WCCO News, streaming on CBS News Minnesota. I'm Caroline Cummings. Starting this month, using marijuana is now legal in Minnesota. So what does this mean for you, your job, and the city where you live? Over the next half hour, we are going to answer all of those burning questions. First, let's break down some of the specifics of the sweeping 300-page bill that made things legal. It was signed into law on May 30th, making Minnesota the 23rd state to make it legal for anyone 21 and older to smoke pot. This means Minnesotans can now have up to 2 pounds of marijuana flower in their homes or 2 ounces on their person out and about in public. It will also automatically expunge low-level cannabis convictions and set up a board to consider expungement or resentencing of felony crimes. But when it comes to buying a marijuana product at a dispensary, that could take more time, up to 12 to 18 months, in fact, to get all of those rules and systems for oversight in place. But before marijuana got the green light from state lawmakers, you likely already saw gummies and drinks at breweries with the words "contains THC." That's because the legislature last year authorized THC-infused edibles from hemp. These edibles have a lower dose of THC, that ingredient that produces a high, and you'll still find them on the market even though weed is legal. In February, WCCO learned how some are made. Inside this warehouse in Cannon Falls, it has all the makings of a candy factory, except what they're mixing and molding and shaking with sugar has a secret ingredient for adults only.
So this is our hemp THC oil.
It's thick like glue and looks like honey, but what's inside can make you feel high. Lawmakers last summer said okay to manufacturers like Zach Rohr and his business Mini Grown to infuse 5 milligrams of hemp-derived THC per serving in food and drinks. The change, Rohr says, sent his business to another stratosphere.
Our business has grown by 1,000%. It's almost like we're not even operating the same business anymore. So when that bill passed, it wasn't really a soft launch into THC. It was a full-on fast track, the rocket ship is going and hop aboard.
But this starts with this, hemp. Rohr grows 6 acres of it just around the back of his facility.
We have to grow it, so we grow it outdoors, then we dry it down to about 7% moisture. And once we have everything nicely ground and dried, we send it through our shredder, and what that does is it separates out the bud, which holds the oil from the stems. So what you're seeing here is everything that's been separated out. This is all pure hemp bud.
But this green stuff is not that green stuff. Hemp is like a cousin to marijuana, but what makes them different is hemp doesn't produce as much THC as marijuana does. And federal law says it's only okay to grow it if it has no more than 0.3% of the psychoactive substance in it.
Now maybe it's just a little bit more anxiety now that we see a real bill and it's actually going through. How do we best position our business and our customers, to make this transition?
So where can and can't you use marijuana? The law specifically says you're allowed at home, at another private residence with the owner's permission, or places licensed for on-site consumption. You can't smoke weed anywhere smoking cigarettes is prohibited, like inside restaurants, hospitals, public transportation, and retail stores. But what about outdoors in public places? It doesn't specifically say. So some cities are racing to pass local ordinances that prohibit that. Here's my colleague, David Schumann.
In Lakeville, some people think the great outdoors might not be as great if everyone can do this.
Nobody wants to have your kids at a park with a group of people smoking weed right next to you.
It might cause people not to attend the community parks and events and things like that.
Yes.
That was exactly Mayor Luke Hellier's thinking after learning the law legalizing marijuana allows for smoking and vaping in public places, except for if local governments adopt an ordinance establishing it as a petty misdemeanor.
You can't smoke or vape cannabis products in city parks or on sidewalks and other public places.
I would love to have it, go to a park, wherever. I just don't know how possible that would be to keep it respectful for everybody on a large scale.
The law already bans smoking in cars, on public transportation, and indoor gathering places like bars. But several cities say that doesn't go far enough.
The last thing I want to do is create a situation where people are deterred, especially from outside of Lakeville, to come and try our restaurants because someone might be smoking pot.
In Lakeville,
I think that'd be a great idea that Lakeville is doing that.
David Schumann, WCCO News.
The State Office of Cannabis Management, which is charged with the regulatory oversight, is still in its infancy. This means there won't be any state-issued business licenses for retail dispensaries or manufacturing businesses of cannabis products for at least a year. Still, other cities are passing temporary bans on new cannabis businesses as they await state guidance. Starting August 1st, Minnesotans will be able to have up to 2 pounds of marijuana in their home. But buying weed at a dispensary like this won't happen as quickly. In the meantime, local governments, though, have questions.
The cannabis bill was 300 plus pages long, so trying to, most cities haven't gone through it with a fine-tooth comb. So what does this mean? What are the highlights?
When it's up and running, the Office of Cannabis Management will be the state regulatory agency tasked with licensure and enforcement of the rules. But the law does allow cities and counties to adopt reasonable restrictions about when and where cannabis businesses can operate. That includes prohibiting them within 1,000 feet of a school or within 500 feet of a daycare, public park, or residential treatment facility. Cities and counties can also press pause with moratoriums on cannabis businesses until January 2025. The West St. Paul City Council passed one until that date.
We're not going to allow these certain types of businesses within our community for right now to give us a time to study the issue, look at what kind of regulations are going to be put in place, or what do we want, what's best for our community.
There's a lot. We're still learning.
Meanwhile, the Hopkins City Council is also considering a moratorium for 120 days.
There's just aspects of the program where the devil is in the details, and so those details have not come out yet. And so we just like a chance to hit pause and to be able to take some time to look at the different rules that are coming out and make decisions that are best for Hopkins.
One place you won't be able to smoke in public, the Minnesota State Fair, according to fair organizers. You also won't be able to buy those hemp-derived edibles there either. But bill authors did imagine a future where cannabis events exist, where you can buy and use marijuana. Thousands will flock to the Minnesota State Fair, but you won't be able to use newly legalized cannabis while you're there.
People do need to be aware of where it is that they are consuming to ensure that it's allowed.
The new law authorizes marijuana use at home, other private residences with permission, or a place licensed for on-site consumption. Smoking in public, including the fair, is prohibited.
Put receipt in the bag.
It will be at least a year before you can buy marijuana products at a dispensary, but there are food and drinks already on the market infused with THC from hemp, weed's cannabis cousin. Still, the Minnesota State Fair told WCCO in a statement vendors can't sell them this year.
The legalization has been many years in the making.
Layli Fadahi, who pushed for the law and now runs a cannabis consulting firm, says the State Fair can restrict those sales.
It is within the rights of local businesses to make their own determinations as to whether they're going to allow cannabis consumption on site.
There is a future for cannabis events. A new business license allows for temporary sales and consumption. This will allow people to host events up to 4 days long if they're age restricted and have proper security.
The cannabis event space, I think, is going to be massive in Minnesota.
Josh Wilkensimon organized the Legacy Cup for newly legal low-dose hemp THC edibles last year. He says 6,000 people attended. Similar events can soon happen with marijuana.
I would be first in line to apply for one. We want to do the event by the books. We don't want to be operating in a gray area at all.
Many of you may also be wondering what this new law means for where you work. We talked with the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce and a cannabis attorney to break down how the law will impact your job. What is the number one question you're getting from businesses in the chamber about how this new cannabis law will impact them?
That is the question. How is this new cannabis law going to impact us?
The Minnesota Chamber of Commerce is fielding several requests from their 6,000 plus members about how legal weed will impact companies' cannabis policies. The bottom line, those rules may change. For starters, under the new law, employers can't require a drug test to screen for cannabis as a condition of employment, with some exceptions for certain jobs like police officers, firefighters, childcare workers, and more.
You need to make sure it's in writing, and you need to make sure it's distributed to employees in advance of taking any action. But you can absolutely say, nothing in this law is requiring me to allow you to have these products on my property or while you're using my equipment or things like that.
That is true. A company can say no cannabis products allowed at the workplace, but businesses can't refuse to hire you or even fire you because you use cannabis off the clock.
It's like with alcohol. Now that adult use cannabis is legal, you are free to consume adult use cannabis in your free time, but of course you may not show up to work impaired.
Employers can test you, though, if they think you're under the influence at the office or while using a company car. Regardless, whether it's personal or for business, drive high and it's a DUI.
I think there will be some growing pains, like with any big major change. I recognize this is a major change. I think you will see some employers who might not realize that the law does indeed protect employees pretty much thoroughly.
Up next, tensions grow high over the new law, why the feds could have Minnesota gun owners who smoke pot in their line of sight. The new state law is causing headaches for lawful gun owners. At the federal level, marijuana is still illegal. And the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, the ATF, says anyone who smokes marijuana is still, quote, federally defined as an unlawful user of a controlled substance, and therefore is prohibited from possessing firearms or ammunition. Here is a look at what you need to know. If you own a gun and want to use marijuana, think again. States giving the green light to cannabis clash with federal law, where prohibition is still on the books.
The fact that they sent out the notice, I think, is a cause for some raised eyebrows.
A warning from the ATF is sounding the alarm for Second Amendment supporters who have long been aware of that state and federal cannabis contradiction, whether it's for medical or recreational use. Rob Dorr with the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus says gun owners should be aware of those risks.
I think if they weren't planning on enforcing it, they may have just let it go and kind of be a wink, wink, nudge, nudge that, yes, it's illegal, but much like other federal cannabis prohibitions, we're not going to be enforcing it.
It's going to be more strictly regulated.
Cannabis attorney Jason Tarasek says that's often the case, the feds turning a blind eye.
It's an interesting song and dance we're going through with the federal government.
Minnesota's new law prohibits sheriffs from denying someone a permit to carry solely because they use marijuana, whether it's medical cannabis or for recreational use. But again, federal law says otherwise. Tarasek and Dorr both wish there was any action in Washington to clear things up.
It'd be great to get some clearer guidance from the federal government that would make people in legal markets more comfortable, that they don't need to be worried about the federal government knocking on their door.
It's important to note that driving while high is still illegal, but DWI cases for marijuana are more complicated. I spoke with some experts to find out why. If you're drunk and get pulled over, you'll have to take a breathalyzer test. Over the legal limit, and that's a DWI. But there's no test like that for marijuana.
In our system of justice, this happens sometimes, where technology does not advance to the level of legislation.
That makes marijuana DWIs more complicated, says criminal defense attorney Joe Tamburino.
THC gets stored in basically the fatty tissue cells of our body. And it stays there a while. So you could have smoked, a lot of marijuana a month ago and still test positive today.
Lawmakers this year approved $15 million for more drug recognition evaluators, or DREs, law enforcement who complete special training. James Stewart with the Minnesota Sheriff's Association says that's a good start, but
the school is many weeks long, and to send every officer or deputy who's going to be conducting traffic accident investigations off to a school isn't realistic at a point in time when our recruitment and retention is harder than it's ever been.
The new law establishes a pilot project to study roadside fluid tests and their ability to determine if somebody is high. Samples can only be collected with somebody's consent and can't be used in court.
It's going to be more officers off the street while conducting these type of processes.
The new law also means tens of thousands of Minnesotans can now wipe their slate clean. State officials will automatically clear low-level cannabis convictions for nearly 70,000 Minnesotans. This is called expungement, and it has a big impact on people's lives.
It was life-changing.
Cameron Taylor was convicted of fifth-degree felony possession of marijuana more than a decade ago, and all of these years later, he still feels the impact.
I've done a lot of positive things even since the conviction, but there's a lot of things that I still would like to do, that sometimes having that felony has still been a barrier.
A barrier to housing and to certain jobs, but also how some people see him.
And it's something that even after you pay your debt to society, society doesn't let you forget that you still have that felony.
Soon, Taylor could get his record cleared thanks to the new law legalizing marijuana in Minnesota. A new board will consider resentencing or expungement of 230,000 marijuana felonies like Taylor's. There's also an automatic expungement process for low-level cannabis convictions. 66,000 are eligible.
This is going to have a huge impact on people's lives.
Justin Terrell with the Minnesota Justice Research Center says it's a step towards a fairer criminal justice system. Black Minnesotans are 5 times more likely to get arrested for marijuana possession than white Minnesotans.
Today we have an opportunity to just take a much more mature approach to this. People like to smoke weed. People have been incarcerated for weed. We should have some processes in place that reconcile these two things.
Taylor is excited at the chance to turn a new page in his own life and for Minnesota's next chapter. Still ahead, some Minnesotans could feel the change of the new law on their wallets. Why legalizing pot could lower costs for medical cannabis patients. Now that it's legal, Minnesota adults can start growing their own marijuana at home. To do that, they'll need seeds. The federal prohibition of cannabis creates a bit of a legal gray area for people who want to grow green. But state regulators here plan to give seed sales the go-ahead at your favorite stores.
Try to avoid this, but if you have to, put it on there.
Ian Davis and his small team at Green Nectar Cultivation are gearing up to supply a few stores with the key ingredient for cannabis home growing. It's one of the first elements of the recreational marijuana law that takes effect August 1st.
And as soon as that happened, we were go time. It was time to brainstorm, see what's legal, what is available to bring to the market on the 1st. Like, what is the soonest available thing that we can sell, and it's seed.
There won't be cannabis manufacturers or retail dispensaries in Minnesota until a new state regulatory agency is up and running, and that could take at least a year. But weed seeds are regulated like any other you'd buy for your garden, which is why they'll be in stores sooner.
My advice for consumers would be to look at that label.
Michael Merriman is the seed regulatory supervisor at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, the agency charged with oversight of all seeds.
Our seed program is really about truth in labeling and consumer protection so that the consumer knows what they're getting. You know, you read that label and you should know exactly what to expect from that label. How much seed is in this package? What kind is it? Is it lettuce, asparagus, cannabis?
Businesses like Green Nectar Cultivation need a state permit and have to follow proper testing for things like contaminants and label requirements like how much you're getting per package, who's supplying it, and what's called a lot number, tracing the seed's origin.
Having Minnesota be here, being a good representative and making sure that everything is oversighted, tested, and labeled, we're here for it.
Many Minnesotans already use cannabis regularly to treat their medical condition. But how will a new adult use market impact existing medical patients? I asked the director of the Office of Medical Cannabis in the State Health Department about what's next.
This is an excellent product.
Nearly 40,000 Minnesotans make visits like this, purchasing medical cannabis to treat chronic pain, cancer, and other conditions.
It's changed my life dramatically. I'm not even the person that I was prior to being in the medical cannabis program.
Joan Barron of Ramsey says it saved her life and moved her away from opioids, but it doesn't come cheap, costing her $200 a month.
I'm fortunate I am able to do that. And now that the fee will be dropped, that's huge.
The sweeping bill this year legalizing recreational marijuana in Minnesota eliminated the $200 annual fee to join the medical registry, taking down a big barrier to entry. Minnesotans 21 and older buying adult use products will see state and local sales taxes plus a 10% gross receipts tax. But medical cannabis is tax-free.
It will be likely a cheaper product for patients in the program as well.
Chris Thokus, director of the Minnesota Office of Medical Cannabis, says enrollment has mostly increased since 2015, but now it could shrink. She says states with adult use markets have seen a 30 to 40% decrease in medical patients. Do you believe that Minnesota's medical cannabis program will be sustainable into the future?
We'll likely see a reduction in the number of patients, but I do think that there will be enough demand from folks who are interested in maintaining that relationship with a pharmacist as well as access to certain products.
Barron intends to stay in the medical program and hopes a new recreational market will make it more affordable for everyone.
I'm glad that the med program is getting fixed in the way that it should have been fixed to begin with.
There are still many questions to be asked and answered as Minnesota ushers in this new era of legalization of cannabis. We will continue to cover this topic and bring you everything you need to know on WCCO TV and streaming on CBS News Minnesota. And for more answers to your most asked questions, check out our marijuana page at wcco.com/marijuana. Thanks so much for streaming this special from WCCO News. Have a great rest of your day.